Hey everyone, Remington here, your host of the Deeper Energy Podcast. My next guest is Debbie Godfrey. She's been helping parents around the world for 30 years go from despair to hope with practical hands-on ideas. Her idea of positive parenting sounds straightforward, and although simple, I think where many parents may feel lost is when it comes to the implementation of her techniques. I realized quickly in this podcast that I was getting a compressed bare bones training session. One of her tips I even instantly implemented with my 3-year-old. It was to give my little girl the chance to make her own cereal in the morning. I made like a small container full of her cereal and put it lower on the shelf so that she could, go and grab it and make her own little cereal. You could just see like that joy in my little girl's face because she could do something by herself. And then, of course, as we came home in the afternoon after the kindergarten, she instantly made herself a bowl of cereal, where I think I usually, as a parent, say, no, you have to eat something healthy or whatever. And, cereal's not so unhealthy, but she's so happy that she can now not have to ask me or involve me in this cereal situation. So this is just like one example of what Debbie can do for you. She gives you these small tips that actually turn out to be very empowering for the entire family. She kind of made that point of like, find something like make a list of the things that you can do or that your kids can do on their own already, right? Without you having to be involved. And this is just like, it comes out to brushing the teeth or going to bed at a certain time at night, stuff like that. We touched on all that stuff. And if you want to know more about her, obviously check out the episode, and then you can check out the show notes where we have all the links to her website and all the work that she's been doing. So enjoy that. As you are all aware of by now, this podcast is separate from my controlling and management roles at my wife's pharmacy. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring high quality information about health, religion, science, and the related tools for navigating these topics to you, the listener. For the last year or so, Eric and I have been figuring out how to run a weekly podcast with new and interesting guests while maintaining an above average production quality. And to be honest, I had estimated the time such an endeavor required. In order for us to not only continue down this path, but create even better content for you, I am humbly asking you for your support. The best way to support this podcast is to check out our website, therealremington.com, if I could pronounce it correctly, and contribute what you think via the PayPal link in the top menu, or visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/deeperenergy, which is also linked up in the menu on the website. I want to take this moment to personally thank each and every one of you that listen to our show. I see the statistics, and it always warms my heart to see the downloads. It keeps the furnace of creativity and perseverance burning strong. So thank you for that. And just thank you for being part of what we're trying to do here. And now please enjoy the conversation with the caring and forthcoming Debbie Godfrey. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm fabulous. I'm really looking forward to this.
That's nice. Yeah, me too. Parenting is a topic where I think it's one of those topics where I think like I know everything, and I'm sure you're going to prove that I know nothing. So I'm an open book. I'm an empty cup of tea. Please fill me up with parenting knowledge. Let's do this. I'm a parent I've got 3 kids, and we've done the whole ups and downs. I don't think I was reading your profile a little bit. You guys had quite a very drastic down at some point, and then to come back from that, and then to share that. I would just love to pick your brain on parenting and it's positive parenting, right? That's the website also, positiveparenting.com. Yeah, so let's just jump into this topic. This is good stuff. I love parenting. I love being a dad, so I hand myself over to you.
Okay, well, it's funny because that you think that I have something to teach you that's better than what you know. I mean, I think that I love that. Thank you. But I think that my journey definitely shows that that's not necessarily true. It's more the desire, like what you have. You say you love parenting. That's what I found when I first discovered this, because when my kids were little, I think I was miserable 90% of the time, yelling at them and not having fun. And like, as you said, I have a bumpy journey. We can talk about that if you want. But as I got through that bumpy time, and I took my first real parenting class, and I just loved it. And I thought, oh, this is super fun. And I organized my neighbors together, and the person I took the class from, we hired her. We each chipped in $5 and hired her to come in every Saturday and teach us a lesson. And we would trade different people's houses and provide coffee and donuts and then have this lesson. And it was just because I was so needing something to not be yelling at my kids and being kind of crazy mom all the time. And those little shots of things that are so simple yet pretty profound, to go from yelling and punishing to actually teaching our children something valuable and responsible, and teaching them to be respectful, but in a, I would say, kind of a backwards way. Like, we usually demand respect, and that's not how we teach respect. And so I just was super excited about it. And then after using a lot of the tools that I had learned over a year, I thought, oh, this would be really a fun thing to teach. And that's kind of what led to me starting my business doing this. And also a prayer I put out during those hard times. I found myself, after a divorce, a very hard divorce, working in a law firm. And I have 3 little kids. I can barely pay for daycare. And I had subsidized childcare. So I'm barely making anything. And I just said, God, give me work that I love, that makes a difference in the world, and lets me be home after school for my kids. Like, that was my deepest desire, was to be able to be engaged with my kids in my perception of what that would be, which is going on field trips and being there after school and that sort of thing. And that's what kind of led the way to the parenting classes happening, because that allowed me to have a very flexible schedule. I could schedule my classes to teach when their dad had them. I was able to schedule, meetings and whatever work I had to do at home flexibly around their schedules. And it really led me to having what I feel like was a very wealthy life, maybe not in money. I mean, I scraped by, but I was no means rich, but I had that flexibility and that time with my kids, that my own perception of me was what I wanted.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, it's kind of funny, because today coming here was like, I wanted to have this conversation, obviously, like, that's not, but I was like, gosh, that's one of the values I have, is at 3 p.m. is like, pick up the kids, and now I'm daddy, the phone is gone, I'm just with the kids. And that's for sure a value of mine that I hold really high. I hold it above making money too. That's just what it is for me. Because the time, you just don't get that time back, I don't think. With they're 18, and then they don't care about you really anyway, in that sense. Like, they don't really want you to be around. And so I've got like this little window, and the rest of my life I'm going to be able to work late shifts or do things, but until my last one is, kind of like giving me like, okay, Dad, give me some space. Until that happens, I should just be sucking it all in and taking it all the time I can with them, because there's just so many little moments. It's so precious. I just picked, like, my wife just brought him home from the kindergarten, and then I picked up my boy from like the after school, like, he goes, whatever you call it. I don't even know what you call it anymore. Like the after school kind of, I have it all in German in my mind, but and you just look them in the eye and kind of see where they're at and what they're doing. And it's just amazing when you really step back and just look at like this 9-year-old, this 5-year-old, and this 3-year-old, and how they're all in these different stages, and how they're all like, they're happy. And you come up to them and you're like, I love you. I'm going to go. I miss you. Oh, I miss you too. Oh, Daddy, why are you going to work? And it's like, but I love that, because it means that we have like a healthy connection. And it's okay to miss each other too. That's also healthy. It'd be a lot worse if they're just like, hanging on to me like, no, don't go. And if that would be too much for me, I couldn't handle that.
Well, and I think that speaks to a few things. One is, and I'll give you a parenting tip here. I mean, saying I love you is so great. I mean, that's one of the best things we can do. And you can take that deeper by saying what I love about you is, and remembering, whenever we're acknowledging them in that way, I love you is pretty general. It doesn't, everybody needs to hear it and say it. Obviously, I don't want to say that. But with kids, when we say, I love the way, your energy just lights up the room for me, or I love the way you're helping your mom today, and it made her smile so big, and I love the way you whatever, and you fill in those specific details, those are the things that light kids up. Those are the things that make them really feel like, oh, you see me, like you see the things I'm doing. And so I like to take those opportunities, what you're talking about, those moments where you just observe and look at life through their eyes and make an observation. Like, I love the way you're just studying that ant. Like,
yeah. I know kids are awesome for that. That really, it is so true. Kids are just great. And so just to kind of label it, give it a better label, to be a little bit more specific, so that there's just even a deeper connection even, right? It's like, oh, okay. Like, he loves me. We all know he loves me. He says it, but like, he loves the way that I'm riding my bike. Like, my little 3-year-old, she just started riding bikes. No one taught her because she's got 2 bigger brothers and sisters. So it's just like, she's jumping on that bike. She doesn't care, and she just never thought about it. And that video had to go through all the family, on WhatsApp and all the things. And it's just like, God, you just look at that. You're like, and me, my wife and I looked at each other again. And we're like, okay, it's another step. Like, she's getting bigger and bigger. And it's like, you're losing that little 2-year-old, 3-year-old. She's turning into like a little girl now. And it's, it's just so precious. It's hard. It's, it's amazing. But at the same time, it's kind of like, hold on tightly, let go lightly. It's like what we always say. It's like, you just have to be in it. You have to be with it.
For sure. And it is so easy to say, I'm proud of you, or, good girl, or, just something super generic like that. Yeah. And it takes much more thought and much more observation and connection to say, I love the way you just jumped on that bike. I mean, that took a lot of courage. Yeah. I mean, what was going through your head? Like, you could have this whole conversation about her journey that she could teach you about her own inner being. And you don't get that with the generics. You don't get that with the, not thinking comments that we've all learned to say to our children. So it's definitely, to me, it's different than praise. Like, everybody says praise your kids. That's how you build their self-esteem. Well, yes. And praising often focuses on external, like on end results. You got good grades. I'm proud of you. You sat still. I'm proud, good girl, or whatever these things are. Whereas encouragement is a way to really look at their journey and their process and acknowledge that, and not so much focused on the end result as their journey, which I think is where we can super greatly connect with them and where they see us. And as you're saying, each kid is so different. So being able to see how each child is different is also a huge gift to the kids, when they don't all have expectations on them that are just general. Like, okay, everybody's got to get good grades. Everybody's got to be good in sports. Everybody's got to be good at whatever. Like, no, everybody needs to achieve a bare minimal standard of everything, but each child has their own unique gifts and talents. And so to really recognize those, some of the kids just make us laugh and they're so funny. Some of them may be more serious, but maybe they're good in, their studies, and they really just love to learn. And so all of them have their unique gifts and talents, and we can really help them really celebrate themselves and their uniqueness, so that they don't lose that. Because so often this world tries to put us all in these cookie cutters, like we're all supposed to be something. And that breaks kids' spirits, that when they feel like they don't fit in. And so I think it's wonderful as a parent to give our children a sense of belonging by really seeing who they are, to really taking that time to pay attention. And I bet you could explain each of your 3 children, like their uniqueness in great detail. And they need to hear that from you too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's such a fun, like, something that's popping in my head right now. Are you familiar with any of Stephen Covey's work?
Oh yes, of course. Okay. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens was a book. I think either he wrote it with his son or something. It was fun. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah. Because that just reminds me of that one of the very first stories in the very beginning of it was this interaction with him and his son. His son is like now older and running the company and everything. It's kind of funny because I haven't checked in. I remember reading that book. My dad gave it to me back like 20 years ago. And so, he's gone and his son is running the company or something like that. And I just was
getting back into it again with Eric, and I were kind of running through the book, kind of just as a way to run through effectiveness even in our relationship as a worker. Like I'm his boss, and we're trying to figure out the stuff. And I was like, maybe we should just jump into this book. And it reminded me, the story came up with him and his wife, and the way that you just said that, like their social mirror, the way that their expectations of their son. I guess he was really bad at baseball or something, and so they were kind of embarrassed, and so they were protective of him when he was playing baseball, and it was like not authentic, right? Because the son kind of caught up on it. Like they didn't really. There was like this whole miscommunication going on about, okay, he's striking out. Well, now we're parents, and we're like, no, it's fine. You're gonna do it. You're good. You're gonna, trying to give him this external thing, and really it was just them embarrassed. It just proved that. It reinforced the fact that they were just embarrassed about the fact that their son was failing miserably at this sport in front of everybody or something like that. So he went back to the drawing table with him and his wife, and they changed themselves, right? And they decided to go back and say I guess what did they do? I mean, what was the way to bring that back? There was something, I'm kind of forgetting it now, actually. How
Yeah, I don't recall that specific story. I mean, I know I read Stephen Covey, and he influenced a lot of what I know and what I do. I mean, I feel like all of that was absorbed. And same with Deepak Chopra. He wrote 7 Spiritual Laws for Kids too. So, all of those gurus from back then kind of informed us in our parenting. I could imagine that they would just be more authentic. I mean, I think you led that story well with that they were kind of having to put on this face for the public or whatever it is, and so he and his wife probably decided, hey, with our kids we just need to make sure we're honoring our kids where they are and being authentic, because kids know when we're faking it. I mean, sure. You can't, that's part of the whole what we were talking about in terms of encouragement, and saying, oh, that's good or that's great, and the kid knows they didn't do a great job. They're like, yeah, right, you're just saying that because you're my parent and you're supposed to say that. And that's why it's so important to point out the unique things where you can look at it and go, wow, well, you did this really great here, and it looks like this you were working on, or And I always find a good blanket statement when I don't know how to be delicate about something that maybe they didn't do well or that is off in my own opinion. You could always say that's interesting, and that one usually
that's interesting
is a way to be more authentic. Like that was an interesting way to do that, and I can get away with that one more because there's less fakeness to it than saying it's good when it's not good.
And just accepting them for who they are, right? that's all you really have to do. You just have to be like, okay, this is not his sport. Or do you want to play it? Like, why are we doing this in general? Like this, is this something that you're even into, or is it just me projecting on you? Like a lot of parents do, especially in sports. It's like, it's almost toxic sometimes, whereas it
is toxic often.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, man, he doesn't even want to do that. I've experienced that with my son, even when trying to teach him something, which is interesting. We were on the mountain, and he was snowboarding. We're teaching him snowboarding, and I think, oh, I'm good. I know how to snowboard. I'm going to teach him how to snowboard. So we go up there, and I'm just totally blocking him. Like I'm basically everything that I was doing was just pushing him in the wrong direction. And one of the instructors that we hadn't booked was there, and. Oh, actually, it was the other way around. We booked the instructor, but Tristan wanted me to be around anyway because he was kind of still young enough to where he didn't want to be with this other guy by himself or whatever. And so the instructor's like, just let him do however he wants to do. Like, just let him, if he wants to slide on his butt all the way down, just let him do that. It's like he's 4 years old. Like it's just either he can do it, or 5, whatever. Either he can do it or he can't. Nothing you're saying right now. Besides, all you're doing is just putting more input on, and he doesn't need any other input. He's got enough input with just getting down the mountain without dying, And
you were able to receive that coaching, it sounds like, from him.
Yeah, it was cool. It was like, oh, okay. So I just was like, I'm just going to, and then we just made it a game. I was like, how do you want to go down? Just go down however you want, And he's like, oh yeah, I can just do whatever I want. And then we had a blast, and it all worked, and he was snowboarding by the end of the day. it was like, oh yeah, ding dong. I like, my overparenting, all my little things, just forget all that and just let him be him and do whatever it is that he wants to do. And if he wants to take him off and go get a hamburger, then that's what we're doing. Cause this is like vacation, right? Like this isn't, we're not like, we're not, that's a whole other thing. It's like, I don't understand. Why do you go on vacation and you put your kids on these external stressors, just because you want them to be the snowboarder that you always dreamed them to be, because that's what you wanted to do. And, it's like this whole circle. It's like, let it go, man.
Right. But that's such a great example of something that's going to take you through even his teen years. I mean, you're always going to go back and remember this moment where you learned how he learns best. Like this moment where you saw the transition from frustration and being blocked into open and learning. And it's not going to change. I mean, he's going to grow and he's going to still have that same kind of learning style. And so, to me, those are the moments that I live for with my kids, that, where I've had these moments of seeing my child all of a sudden through somebody else's eyes. In this case, it was a ski instructor, right. But to go, oh, wow. Like, yeah, this is good. This. And that to me is what the parenting classes are. It's like, it just opens my eyes to all these little moments and things where I think I'm doing it right, or the right way, or the best way, or whatever. But really, there's other ways to do things that might be more effective. And there's some things that are effective for some of our kids and that aren't as effective for others. And so we have to learn to adjust and treat each of our children, and parent each of them in a way that's effective for them. And I get so many people that come to my classes, and yes, there's a ton of diagnoses out there. I know that, but I've been teaching for 30 years, and 30 years ago, ADD was all the rage, and it still is, but there's a lot of other things. But I would get probably a third of the parents would come to my classes and, oh yeah, my kid has ADD or ADHD or whatever. And we would go through the class, and like half of them, their kids were not ADHD. It was their parenting style that clashed with who the child was. And when they started using a parenting style that was more aligned with how the child learned, all of those behaviors that they were doing, that they were complaining about, went away. And then with the other half, whose kids actually did have something physiological that was giving them, impulse control issues or whatever it was, they found that even then, learning a bigger, broader range of ways to react and respond to their kids allowed their kids to behave better, allowed their self-esteem to be better. Because that's the biggest problem with kids with actually any of the diagnoses, is the secondary self-esteem damage that comes when we have expectations of them that they can't achieve. And so it's not so much, they can learn how to cope and learn coping skills and mechanisms for whatever their deficit is, whether it's, dyslexia or ADHD or sensory processing or whatever the name is. They can learn the coping skills and the ways to adjust to those things. But what they don't always succeed is in the self-esteem damage that happens from the judgment and the frustration and the impatience that everybody around them has, including parents and teachers.
Yeah, it's crazy, because that stuff is also things that you're not aware of as a parent, that you're actually judging your child, that you're not even aware that that's going on. And it's like this undercurrent of negative energy that pulls everything, and it doesn't matter how good you're working on the symptom. It's like this undercurrent of the true acceptance of the child for who they are, and not making them feel guilty because it's this one. Maybe you have multiple children, and this one child just kind of is like the problem child or whatever, and it just turns into that whole thing. Or even the dynamic. You have 3 kids, so we have like a sandwich kid, right? So the sandwich kid is like a dynamic there. I see that with my first daughter. She's in the middle, and she's kind of got it from both ends, And what I really wanted to talk to you about, as you're talking about, I was like, oh, you know what? now that I got you on here, because this is a point of how would you say, like, I don't know the word, like contingency, or it's like a point in our, like, where Franzi and I we've battled it out multiple times, and I don't know if the solution that we have is really the most elegant one. That would be the bedtime. You have the bedtime, and get your kids into bed at say, I don't know, 8 p.m. every night without any hassles. What is your trick there?
Well, definitely it's a process, and definitely it's one of the most common struggles that a lot of parents have. And routine and training is key, obviously, having a consistent routine. So when if you have a schedule that's really chaotic, where we're out some nights and this and that, and it's hard to have a consistent bedtime, it's hard to make that work. So the first thing is, are you in a space and time in your lives where you actually could be pretty consistent, even for just a couple weeks in a row? Once you get a routine in place, then you can be out of the system and have a late night out, and you can recover from it. But you've got to get the system in place. And so, well, what do you do right now? What's your bedtime routine right now?
The bedtime routine has gotten better because the kids have just gotten older, right? That just let's see, where should I start? We could just talk about it now, but it's gotten a little bit better. But I maybe. Okay, this is the thing. Like, we started off with this with our first daughter, with Carlota. The history goes back to us moving out of our house. So this is like this is my whole thing. This is my wife's gonna be like, oh, here he goes. This is the way that I justify the way that we do it now. I justify it to her too, because we moved out of our house when we were remodeling our house, and then Carly was 3 years old, 3.5. So she was still very like clingy. It was kind of it wasn't really like, in retrospect, I wish we would have waited a couple more years to optionally remodel our house, because it put like this stress on top of the whole family. We moved into an apartment, and the whole year of us being in this apartment was very stressful because of that external stress. And so the bedtime thing was just terrible. It was just like, that was getting the kids, we didn't have enough space in the apartment, and then they all had to, like, two of the kids had to sleep in the same room together, which is actually not that big of a deal. It's totally normal, but it created a new dynamic for them, which they didn't have before, because before they all had their own bedroom. And so now it was like, okay. And what I ended up doing, I just went to bed with the kids. I'm like, I'm just going to lay down with them. And so I did the whole lay down with the kids thing, and then the whole sneak out of the bedroom thing, and make sure that they sleep and wake up. And I was a slave to that, because I did that. Franzi was always like, don't do that. Make a cut and go to bed. And I felt bad, and I was too emotional about it. So I ruined this whole go to bed thing by me going and laying down especially with Carlota, because she's even a little bit more clingy. And I felt bad. I had like a guilt thing about moving out and putting her in this new situation. So that was like me trying to make up for that. So fast forward to us being back in our home now. Now it's like, okay, everyone's got their own room. We're safe. We're good. What happens? They all moved into our new big bedroom that we built for ourselves. Like, we did like this huge family bed now. Franzi can't even sleep in there, because it's just, she's like, well, she just says it's just too many bodies in here, She just, it's so for the longest time, it was like me sleeping with all the kids, and Franzi used to go sleep somewhere else, and I'm sleeping with like 3 kids in this huge family bed, because that, and the thing is, like, So
is that where you are now?
Well, kind of. Like, now it's to the point where it's chilled out a lot. It's just kind of stopped without any reason. Like, they're not so clingy anymore. It's like we kind of got over it for some magical reason. Like, now we had like a good month or two of this scheduled in bed, lay down. Oh God, brush your teeth. That whole thing. I don't know. It's just, I can't put words on it. You just. I wish we had this conversation like at 8:30 p.m. after I just got back from doing this, because then I would just be like, yeah, and then it happens there, and then this one does this, and this one does that. And actually, since it's been so chill lately, I don't have like this emotional trigger that I usually have, like when you have those night, like, yeah. Anyway, I guess I'll just put it down for you. Now it's like I sleep with my boy in the big bedroom. The girls are all sleeping together in one bed upstairs now. So there's still the together sleeping thing is still happening.
Right.
And
so let me just say that there's a style of parenting, attachment parenting, where they do have family bed, and it's a choice. So when it's a choice and everybody loves family bed, it's great.
Yeah.
But when people aren't sleeping, and it sounds like your wife has that same thing that I had, which I can't sleep with elbows and knees banging into me all night long. Like that doesn't work for me. I don't get good sleep. I don't like it. So family bed was not my preferred style either. So you as a family get to come up with like what you want to do about this. And at some point you and your wife may want to have your own room together again.
Oh, imagine that. Like when that happens, it's like we're like, wait a minute, all the kids are sleeping, we have the bed to ourselves. We're like, let's go to bed. So, that's all you do. You just like say, okay, the sex is like not even important. Let's just go to bed. Right? We'll figure out the sex thing later. But at least we can just like sleep in our own bed by ourselves. It's amazing.
Yeah, and if that's how much relief you have when that happens, then I think that's a sign that you two might want to work towards this. Because here's the thing: the kids will follow your lead wherever you take them. Right now, you've left it open that family bed is how it works around here, and I think kids are naturally going to always gravitate to that if it's possible. If we look at our human evolution, like we were in caves together for millions of years before we like started doing this. Even the whatever family, the way our families are so isolated, we don't have extended family living with us anymore. That's all happened in like the last 100 years.
Right.
So this is super, super new. And I feel like kids' nightmares and kids being afraid in the dark and kids not liking to be left alone is a very primitive response, and it's baked in biologically. So I think always having a sensitivity to that, not wanting to be alone in your room, like we always have to have a basic compassion for that, because this is not how we evolved at all. So understanding that, which is why it was interesting to hear you say that when you put your two kids in the room together, that actually confounded the bedtime routine more, because usually that's one possible solution when you've got chaotic bedtime and kids aren't going to sleep. Sometimes you let them sleep together and that actually causes them to calm and chill and be okay. They're safety from each other, right?
Normally, yeah. I think the only problem there was that they're just so, like the two girls are so close in age. And so there was just that problem.
Taking each other on and
and they just wouldn't get to sleep. And it was like, It's like, what's 9 o'clock, everybody? And we're getting up at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Like this is getting old. Like it was getting that, but that was like, again, that was our own external. I take full responsibility for putting in that situation. But it's interesting that I never thought of it like that as far as the cave. That's totally true. It makes very good sense. And my mother-in-law says that too. She's like, well, do you like to sleep alone? Everyone likes to sleep together. I mean, it's baked in us.
Right. And so that just having that understanding, which I think is where your came from, where you started allowing them into your bed. That was your deeper intuition saying like, this is safety for my children and I'm providing what they need. And our lives don't have to be all about that anymore. And we do get to help them transition. And the way that we do that is based on our feelings and our behavior. So the fact that your wife needed her sleep separately, she took care of herself. That was the best way to do that. Because if she had stayed in the bed, her resentment would have affected the children more than being away from them by leaving. And so you at this point too, it sounds like you would prefer not to have them in your bed. You would prefer to have, you and your wife in your new room that you created with this thing and have them in their own rooms. And so you get to have that if you choose it. But the first thing is to set that intention and to have the talk with your wife and go, okay, I'm ready to do this, because it will be a transition. It
sounds so funny. Like if you had shown me this conversation like 10 years ago when I didn't have any kids, I'd be like, you kidding me? Like this is where we're at now? Like you're bartering with your children for we remodeled our whole house and built our perfect, master bedroom with the bathroom kind of thing, and it's like, that was so cool. This is going to be our thing. And the kids are like, oh, this is great. Their 3 bedrooms upstairs are like just empty rooms with like their toys in it, it's just, but at the other end of the spectrum, I don't know, like I do like that feeling of like when, but at the same, I feel like that having them feeling comfortable and being in a place where it comes from themselves to like where my son, I'm waiting. He's 9. He still kind of wants to chill around. He's still very, he's like me in that sense. He's very, connected, and it's nice. And I want to nurture that too. I like that because I know that eventually that also is going to be gone, and it's like, do you remember the years when you used to, when you used to sleep in bed, I won't be able to talk about it. He'll be like, shut up. Don't say that right now.
Right.
So I know that's coming too. It's around the corner, but before we know it, it's going to be 3 years down the road, and he's going to be like, I'm in my own room, and you don't come in my room. How about that? Like, that's like the next phase, right? So
it could be. I mean, not all of them. It sounds. It just, everybody's different, right?
Yeah,
we all have different patterns and paths. You don't know, but what you do know is how you feel about it, and so your ambivalence will keep you where you are right now.
Ambivalence. That's a good word. What does that mean again?
Like that.
What does that mean, please? What ambivalence? My English has gotten so bad since I moved to Germany. I don't remember what that means.
Yeah, well, it means I feel one way and I feel the other. So I don't.
Ambivalence. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, I have like conflicting ideas in my head. Like, I liked being alone with my wife. That was weird. With my wife in the same.
A mom.
Yeah, with a mom, exactly. I'm not allowed to call her mom either, by the way. Just sorry, honey, I'm outing you like totally on there. And then and then I also want So please continue. So I'm.
Yeah, so you have to really get clear on this before any, the kids will absolutely follow your lead on this. That doesn't mean that they won't fight you once you make a decision. Like, let's say you decide, and think about this, like, how can I still get this connection that I love so much, and this cozy comfortness, and sharing your room. I mean, that's part of sharing your castle. Sharing your thing is part of the way that you're showing love to your kids. And so it almost feels like if I let that go, I'm not loving them in the way that I've already shown them I love them and that they like to be loved. So, there's a big part of this that's holding you back from creating the thing that you want. But let's just say you decide you want to have the limit, both for yourself and maybe because you think it might be time for your kids.
It's probably my main thing is really like just to nurture the relationship with my wife.
And that's pretty important because you and her are together for the rest of time. These kids, you've got about 10, 15 years left and they're gone. Yeah. So that's a perfectly valid and actually one of the main reasons that I would do this, because nothing comes between relationships more than raising kids. I mean, that's what causes most of the divorces. And so it's absolutely key and important that you nurture that relationship and that you two stick together all through your parenting years, because you've got to still love each other at the end of it. And so, I mean, that would be a super noble reason. And so again, you and she have this conversation, like, let's claim our room back.
Okay, we got to make like a strategic plan how we're going to do this here.
Yeah, you'd need to have a plan. And so one of the things that I did because of when my kids were younger and probably around the age yours were, was I always honored the fear at night, and anytime that they wanted to come in for safety. Like, safety to me, emotional safety is super important. And so if they felt the need to come in my room, I didn't ever want to like ban that. But what I did was they weren't allowed in my bed. They were allowed on the floor beside my bed. So either I had a rug or they had a mat, or I actually had mats under my bed that they could pull out and have next to my bed.
Ooh.
So they were totally allowed to come in and just sleep on the side of my bed. Because for me, it was about my quality of sleep, and that I just needed them not in the bed because they would always kick me. Not on purpose, obviously, just kids in bed, they're like flopping around. They're like not still, and every little thing wakes me up. So that was a transition for me. Was they always knew they could come in and lay on the floor beside the bed, and they would do that if they were afraid, and it would allay their fear. So that was one transition. So you and your wife need to come up with your plan. So is it something like that? Is it where they have to sleep in their bed at night, but they can come in the morning? Maybe you have your cuddles and snuggles and that connection, in the morning when everybody wakes up. Maybe it's on Saturdays and Sundays, everybody gets to stay in the bed. Like, there's some way that you and your wife can come up with a routine that has a good balance of alone and together, so that you get to have it all, really.
Yeah, it's interesting. That I like that idea about the weekends. Maybe even doing it more kind of like starting just weaning it off like that, like kind of doing like day on, day off, or 2 days on, 2 days off, and kind of just I don't know. Sometimes they have this idea of like cut the dog's tail just once. You don't need to cut it multiple times, and it's like we're doing that whole thing with my smallest daughter has do we call it a binky?
Pacifier.
Yeah. And so that's like that we're like right there with it. 3, we're trying to do that, So that's like one of those moments where it's like she's instantly gonna want to be closer. She doesn't have that thing. She's like, now I'm like, at least I got mommy here or daddy here. It's gonna be some type of compensation there going on. It's hilarious just to think about how the psychological warfare is happening with these 3 children. It's just I sometimes
it's so magical. I mean, I love it.
It's not negative. The psychological warfare sounds kind of negative, but sometimes it just I compare it to that because there's these mornings where you're trying to get out of the house, and I feel like I've like signed 3 individual contracts with each child. And now we're in the car and we're going, and I feel like I've succeeded in some way, shape, or form, or they've succeeded, and someone signed at the bottom, and what's in that contract I couldn't tell you. It's just like, and then there's times where I remember that we get to work. Franzi and I, she works in the pharmacy, and I have a studio up here, like in the same building. So, like whoever dropped off the other girls and the boy, and then we kind of convene at work again, and we look at each other, we're just like, oh, now we get to work, woohoo! And you feel like relieved, that like I'm at least now I have like work to do, yay, And that was that, that's bad because it was too much work to get out of the house in the morning. There's too much going on, there's too many power plays happening. And then my wife and I are both very dominant people. So, if we're not on the same page, then we power play, and the kids they hone right in on that, So yeah, I've read something about it.
If the parents aren't agreeing, that's a field day for misbehavior for the kids. They love that. Yeah. So that's totally. That's why, again, you two getting on the same page is super important. And I agree. Like that relief at being at work. I know one of my biggest kind of demographics is pretty successful. And I mean, I get a lot of dads taking my class, but a lot of times the wives drag them. As the years have come by, more and more men sign up now because they're doing like you. They're really involved with the parenting. So they are interested. But typically in the past, it's been women who's been successful in their careers. So now maybe they're late 30s, early 40s. And they have this 3-year-old running the house, and they like don't know what to do.
How did
and
that
they're
happen?
going out of their mind. Like, I've been a successful businesswoman, boardroom CEO, whatever, and now I don't know what to do with this 3-year-old who's running the show. And and it's just so we can have really super good self-esteem at work, but our parenting self-esteem could be like squat. And it's because we don't always feel effective or feel like we know what to do or can do, or that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing with these kids. And I think that's a huge way where I can be super helpful to parents where like, yeah, you're the leader and the authority figure, but how you get there is really important. And one of the things that I love about like learning this positive parenting, I know when my kids were around the age of your kids, maybe just slightly older, like I would sit around in the morning drinking my coffee and doing whatever I had agreed to do, but I was not stressed. They were the ones like, hurry up, Mom, we gotta go.
Oh, cool.
Because I trained them like that. They've got to be responsible for this. They've got to be out the door on time. Like they want to get to school, because I didn't make myself in charge of it. And I think that's the key, is figuring out how to delegate the responsibility so that your kids own it, like that they want to be on school on time because they don't want to be late. And that's where if you can get to that place, then you're not carrying all this load, and you're not having to freak in the morning when they're not ready on time. Yeah. If somebody's going slow, I might make an observation, go, oh, it looks like you're lagging a little bit. Are you going to be ready when it's time for you to go? Yeah. And, I'm really careful with my pronouns. Like I don't say we when when it's not like, we need to get good grades. No, you need to get good grades. I can help you if you want, but there's a lot of ways where I think we overuse the we, and it's a mistake, because then that implies that we're carrying responsibility for something that they need to be responsible for. So I'm very careful about that, my wording.
Can I give you can you give me just a 2-second? My wife, I don't know if it's an emergency or if she just wants me to stop.
Absolutely.
Maybe she just wants me to stop talking about her online. let me get this caller back really quick. 1 second. I'm sorry for that. I would never normally do that, but maybe it's an emergency.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
This is perfect.
But maybe I should have her conference call. Hey, everything okay? Elektroleitung Anbau. Wow, that was a lot. So that's the last time I go on my phone when she calls during the podcast. She's calling me and asking me about if the power lines are coming from the top or the bottom to the switches, because she's got someone there to install the drapes.
That's very important.
Because she knows I'm on a podcast, and I always tell her, like, only call me if it's she's done really good. She hasn't done that once in the last 6 months. She's been totally on it. It took a good 6 months training for her to know, like, I'm in a podcast. This is like a live thing, and I don't really want to, and so I have like a protocol with her, and it's like, so only call if it's, and so she calls, and well, she just cried wolf, I guess is what you call that, right? But I wanted to go back to pronouns, because this is so important. This is such a thing that this is where I think the big parenting power play comes in. You mentioned that you trained them. Eric, does that sound familiar? Training? Like this whole training thing. Because that's also a Stephen Covey thing for me. Like I was reading about this, that like when you give them a task, or you give the child the responsibility for themselves, it's really, really hard for them, because when they first get this responsibility to actually to be the boss of this thing. So you guys are the bosses of brushing your teeth. You're the boss of getting yourself ready for school. I'm drinking my coffee, and I'm getting in the car at 7:45, and we're going to school, whether you got underwear on or not. So like, make sure, but the thing is, you can't just drop them into cold water. You have to train them for a period of time so that they understand, okay, and now at the end of this training period, there's a switching of the roles. Like, okay, now I'm giving you the complete control. You're the boss. I'm your helper. If you need help, I'm here for you, but it's on you to ask for help. I'm not going to say, did you put this in your backpack? Did you put that in your backpack? Do you have your lunch? Do you have your homework? That whole thing.
Right.
That's
right. No, and I absolutely got that from Covey. You're right. I mean, I remember reading that about when he taught his son how to mow the lawn. He just didn't drop him in there. He had a way of mowing his lawn, and he was out there with his son every time the lawn needed to be mowed. Like, you go up and down in this straight line and this kitty corner way, and I mean, to the minutest detail. And I really took that to heart, and I've used that with my kids. I remember Michelle, teaching a child, something as simple as teaching a child to clean the bathroom. Parents are always saying, go clean the bathroom. And when you say that, you're setting your kid up for failure. Right. Because I will tell you, a child's version of cleaning the bathroom is completely different from our version of cleaning the bathroom. And so anytime you're vague, and we don't think we're being vague, to us saying clean the bathroom is super, parents tell me this, that's super clear to me. Clean the bathroom. No, it is not super clear to a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. You have to get in there and show them exactly what to do. And even further along what you were saying there, Remington, was that that it's not, okay, now I'm going to turn this over to you. That's not how the training works.
Yeah.
The training works with you observing, like, wow, it looks like you're really onto this. Like, it looks like you've got this handled.
Yeah.
You think you're ready, to be on your own. Like, that's the true ownership, where you're handing it over to them in cooperation with them. Not like where you're the big boss man and you're, like you've kind of like suddenly decided that they're ready. No, they decide when they're ready by showing it through what they're doing, their achievement level, their capability level, that they can handle it and that they're willing to handle it. And you need to know all of those things, because capable and willing are also two different things with kids. They might be capable of it, but if they're not willing, they're not going to do it. Yeah. And so it's super important to make sure that you're managing all that. And yes, you're leading it. Yes, you're facilitating it. But the finesse is when you teach your children and they own the learning. And so us taking our ego out of it is so much better for them. When they learn something and do it and they really feel like they learned it on their own, because we've used the pronouns correctly and we've used the phrasing in this way that they're getting to own what they're learning, and we're not some big superhero teacher. It's just a better way to go about this for long range ownership for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was the thing recently, because I was like, well, every morning with my son, getting him to school in the morning, and it's also unnatural to get up so early and do that whole thing. Like, that's a whole other problem. But okay, that's the society that we're in. That's the cards that were dealt. So okay, he needs to be in bed by this time so that he can get up at that time. He gets up now by himself at 6 a.m, which is like, I was just like, whoa, dude, nicely done. Like, and he's like, yeah, I got to get to school. Kind of like, it's like, all right, man.
He's owning it. That's perfect. That's what you want to hear. You want them owning it. You want them doing it. That's where, like, I didn't do this. This child has decided this.
But it was like, it's a new thing. It's a new thing. Like, I'm proud, but it's very recent. It was, right. And this training process of it was like, my wife, she's kind of like, oh, really, we got to train him and stuff. And I'm like, well, like, he does, like, it's so true. Like, with the bathroom, like, I don't even really know how to clean. Like, if my wife tells me how to clean the bathroom, like, I'm just going to get Windex on everything and just make sure that it's all, and then she just shake her head and be like, okay, and that's the same thing. It's like, well, then train me, and it sounds so weird to say, like, a 38-year-old man to say to his wife, well, train me how to clean the bathroom, but it's so true, because the person that's doing it and knows what's going on, all these, it's kind of like there is no beginner's mind, right? Because everything, so you don't really know what a beginner has to go through to get to the point to where you're at. It's too much knowledge sometimes also blinds you from being a good teacher. There's this.
Absolutely. And it's so helpful. And if your wife understood that it would make you do it correctly by showing you and help, you could be her hero, right? Yeah, and she doesn't understand that all you need is instruction. And typically, like, men and women, like, that's one of the biggest areas, because we, for whatever reason, and this goes back to instincts and all that too as well, like, women just automatically assume a man's doing that on purpose, or, and it's not true. It's like, what you're saying is externalizing these mostly internal things that are happening. It's like, well, if you just show me how to do it, I'll do it. And that's how most men are. Like, they just need to understand, because you're going to do something, like you said, with the Windex, like, path of least resistance is man brain. And like, that's just how it is. And extraordinary attention to detail is typically, and I shouldn't say man, it's like masculine and feminine really is what it is. And we all have both, but there's just differences. And if we don't pay attention to those and honor those, it's going to mess up our relationships. And so definitely with kids, I think being super specific and articulating and training, making sure that they're ready for it is key. And I take any resistance and uncompliance that I'm getting as information. And I look at that information, like, so if the child's not getting up or, following whatever the agreement is. And, this is general. It's not very specific, but I'll take that and go and analyze it. Like, is it that I haven't done enough training? Like, have I not been clear in my communication? Is it that I haven't acknowledged the efforts that they put in, so they've given up and they've just decided, like, this isn't worth it? Is it that, whatever? I'm asking myself questions, because to me, kids naturally want to make us proud, naturally want to help and cooperate and be, do stuff. Like, kids have so much energy to do stuff.
True.
And they feel good about themselves. Like, this is another new thing. 50, 100 years ago, we all lived on farms. Like, everybody had a job. Little kids had to collect eggs and do stuff. And like, everybody had work they had to do. And our culture, the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, kids don't have to do stuff. Like, we do everything for them. It's like, no wonder they can't achieve or do anything. Like, they don't get to have responsibility. And so I think in our homes where we don't have pigs and chickens and all these things anymore, we need to create ways that our children can be valuable and contribute. And so, having jobs and having things that they're responsible for, and just getting up and getting ready is something that they need to be that's a way to give your child self-esteem, is giving them the responsibility for getting themselves up and getting ready and doing stuff. Like, one of the homework exercises in my class is, think of one thing you're doing for your child that your child could be doing for his or herself this week. Like, that's one thing. And you can do that the entire, 18, 20 years you're raising your kid. What is one thing I'm doing for my child right now that my child could be doing for his or herself? And this starts 2-3 years old. Like, a kid can actually put their breakfast together.
Right.
If you have a little kid, you could put like a little amount of cereal in a little bowl and cover it and put it at their height at the fridge, and a little tiny cup. You don't want to give them the gallon of milk that they can spill, but a little tiny thing for them to take that out of the fridge in the morning and make their little breakfast. Oh my gosh, that gives them so much esteem.
That's a cool idea.
The beginnings of this.
I'm going to do that tomorrow. That's a good idea. That's a good one.
One thing at a time. Don't overwhelm them. Don't turn everything over to them at once. But one thing.
First, I'm going to make him watch this podcast, and then I'm going to make him take notes. No, but that's so cool, because I just pictured my little girl playing, because we have like this. It's not manageable. The cereal is in like a bag, and it's too big. And she tries, and she's like always so frustrated, because like, imagine, like, it's like a dog food bag for me, And she's trying to like put it in there, and of course it's gonna like spill all over the place, and everyone's gonna yell at her and be, "Come on, what are you doing, Maggie? Get it?" Her name's Margarita. Maggie, we call her Maggie. She's just like the little small Simpsons girl, and she's still got the binky in the mouth, and it's like, yeah, give her a chance. Just give her like a little container and a little milk, and then she's like, "This is my thing," and she'll love that. She'll love that, because that's the thing, especially at that age, they want to do everything by themselves. And you just don't allow them to. What's this like? That must be so frustrating,
Yeah, and set them up to be successful. And that's why I take my kids' lack of compliance as information, and anything that they're doing. I ask myself, am I having an age-appropriate expectation here for them? I mean, and I'll have to check that, because a lot of people expect things that their kids are not capable of yet at this age. And so I'll back it down and give them a way to be successful. And then you can build from there. So I always like to err on the side of making it easier, not harder. For some reason, we have this mistaken notion, I've got to make it really hard so they like achieve this result and then they're going to be strong and great. No. Do it the opposite. Like, give them something that's way easier, and then they'll crave more. Like, give me more, because they're capable of it. And it's just a much better way, self-esteem wise, for most kids to operate.
It sounds kind of, it's weird that I say this. I have a connection in my mind to cold showers, because to like but that's how he did it too. It's like like small steps, small achievable steps, and that it builds your confidence in that too. It's like, just start out with like 5 seconds, then it's like 10 seconds, and I can do 10 seconds, and all of a sudden you're doing 3-4 minute cold showers, because and it's the same psychological principle with children. And just give them these small little victories that build upon, and they build their self-esteem, and then they're like, look, I'm this independent it's so cool when they come around the corner, like, I did that myself, and you're just like, yeah, man, nicely done. It's for everybody. It's cool. And the parents can kind of, it's like you're front loading this whole management of the family in a way, once you've put in this type of work, it's a well-oiled machine, and you have a family that functions. And it's so true what you said about the farming too. Like, I was trying to say that the other day to Tristan, and I don't think I was talking about farming, but I was just kind of talking like think about how lucky we are. Like, I kind of read a statistic or something that in the developed world, we're like only like 5% of the whole world. I don't know what the number was. Has clean water and has all these things that we have, and just to not take that for granted, to understand that, like, it was storming outside, and I was like, look how cool. Imagine like living in a tent, and not having, and like the water isn't clean. Like, think about that. You just go to the refrigerator, press the button, it comes out nice clean water for you. That's like a a royalty kind of thing in this planet, like to have just clean water coming out of every little faucet that you want, and you just drink it, and to not take that for granted. He's kind of looking at me like, okay, man, get off your pedestal there for a second. But it's true.
Yeah, and
right?
it's true. And and I mean, I used to always threaten my kids when they were little, because they act all entitled, and we always have a problem with that. It's like, man, I'm taking you to Calcutta one of these days, because I just can't handle this. And I was always like, I would say that either in my mind or even to them once in a while, like, and trying to figure out how to get out of this. And one time we had an opportunity and took them to Tijuana, which I don't know if you've ever been there, but
I have been.
Yeah, it's very, very third world and tough. And I mean, literally they were crying, like, take us back. Like, they did not want to stay there at all. And I think that hugely impacted them. It's like, until they actually see what real poverty looks like, and lack of sanitation and all those things, they're not going to get it. So I just realized, like, all that threatening didn't work. Taking them there worked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because the whole thing about keeping the house clean, it's kind of like, my wife tends to take it personal that the kids just kind of come home and they're like, I'm home. So the jacket, the shoes, the bags, they're off of me now, and I go and play now. And she's like, that's so rude, because, like, we all are like, we're all, me and my wife are like sitting there like cleaning everything and going at, and she just, and I'm like, well, don't take it personal, but you kind of do, because it's kind of like, you're not respecting this wonderful house of ours that we have, that we've built together, that we go. And why do you guys go to the kindergarten? Why do you go to, well, school is kind of a different reason, but like, why do the kids go to the kindergarten? I could just stay at home all day and clean all day, but no, we go to work, we make money. This is like the whole thing, so that we can pay for all this stuff. And, it's like, how are you going to explain that to a 3-year-old brain? She's just like, she shouldn't have to deal with that. But at the same time,
no, and they can't. I mean, to me, that's irrelevant to the situation. And so the thing to do is action. So if a child walks in the house and drops the backpack, there's different tactics depending on their behavior. So we have I teach a systematic approach to, when they're misbehaving, you actually assess, like, the reason they're misbehaving. One of the reasons is that they're just, they just came home and they're tired and frustrated or whatever, and they drop their backpack. So one of the things is, you can walk over to them. You don't have to say anything to them, and just stare at the backpack and look at them and put your hand and rub their back. This is if it's a power struggle. Maybe that's not a power struggle. Maybe it's something else. Then I might walk up and rub their back and go, oh, you must have had a really hard day. And I would reach down and pick up the backpack and hand it to them. I wouldn't say, take this to your room or anything. I would just hand it to them. And if you just hand it to them and you're not specifically calling it out, usually they'll just take it. If it was the other thing I was saying, a power struggle, they would drop it or throw it. So you have to know which behavior is at the essence of why they dropped it,
right,
in order for this to be effective. So let's say it's the one where I'm saying, oh, it looks like you had a really rough day. I'll hand the backpack to them. They'll take it. I'll walk down the hall with them, saying, tell me about it. What's going on? And we get to their room. They toss their backpack in their room, and that's it. So either way, it's what the idea is that they don't get away with just trashing the house when they come home, that you're redirecting the behavior and training them. Again, I like that we're using this word. I don't always use that so much, but I think it's the Covey theme in our little podcast here. And so like that training them, that when you walk in the house, you don't just throw everything everywhere. And it's not the everyday nagging, like, why are you throwing everything? And then taking it personally. It's like, okay, I've got to take the time to make sure that this child learns that when they come home, the backpack goes into their bedroom. And so I'm going to do that with these different tactics until they figure it out. Like that's just, that's my job. My job as a parent is to keep this place running in an orderly enough fashion that I don't go out of my mind.
It's interesting though, this, like I pictured you doing that. Like I sometimes if I'm on my game like that too, like it's like you go down on one knee, you get to them on the eye level, right? And then it's they know, like that's what they need. That you're right. Like you're picking them up where they're at. Like they're also, it's also in the kindergarten. It's a stressful thing. They're there with the kids all day. They're being told what to do all day. They probably don't. I mean these angels of these
saints.
The saints that work. Good Lord, and
I couldn't do it.
I mean. If I had to, but God, there's like a million other things that I would like. You really just have to. I don't know how they do that. Maybe you're just like mentally, you just turn it off at some point. I don't know. Hopefully not, right? Because you want to be engaged.
No, I mean the kindergarten teachers who are there, they love it. I mean, they thrive in it. But I mean, and I think it attracts a certain person because it doesn't pay well. And I've always thought we should pay our people who are guiding our children in the younger years like we pay college professors, and the college professors should get paid way less. Like we have it inverted because it's so much more important shaping our children at those younger ages than adults. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me, the whole thing.
It's true. They like if we've been to a kindergarten where it just was too full, there's just too much stuff going on, and this one person's just doesn't have the ability, And you see that the children are just, some will just be left behind. Either some are just with the program, they're like, okay, there's a stressful situation, I'm ready to go, I'm going to do it. These are like the people that are just going to be like that their whole life, no matter what. It's like, thank God. But some kids are kind of like, they need that extra time, they need that extra energy, and especially when they're little ones, right? I mean, that whole phase, that was so heartbreaking back in the day. Like, it's having to kind of like leave them there, and they're like holding on to you, like, don't leave me here. But this kindergarten that we found was really, it's like basically heaven on earth. Like they're just out in the middle of nowhere. We're in a very like sparsely populated area. They're outside even in the wintertime. They can go to the lake, and can't really get much better than that. Thank God for that. But yeah, it's but
I've seen that at Waldorf schools. Is that what it is?
It's kind of like, well, I'm in Germany, so it's
okay.
Yeah, but still it's very, like, even sometimes I'm going to work, I'm like, man, I wish I could be in the Keter today. They're gonna go in the kindergarten. They go swimming. They go down to the lake in the summertime. They go hiking in the forest and do all this stuff and go on bike rides and stuff. But
it's amazing. I mean, that's where kids learn. Like they're at their optimal learning level. So then you bring any subject in that environment, of course they're all going to learn. I mean, it's a no-brainer. We put kids in a classroom in these rows of desks and ask them to be quiet and have, it's just the wrong way to go about learning.
For sure. For sure. I mean, there's probably a percentage of the population that can thrive like that, but it's a smaller percentage than the percentage that is like good to go.
Not everybody. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, yeah. My son's one of those guys too. Like he's definitely trying to fit into this cog system, and he doesn't like it, but we just try and reinforce that with like after school activities, or just letting him be in his world when he wants to be in his world and stuff. But to get back to like this situation where the kids come back from the kindergarten, that's interesting because they still have a type of stress that they have to kind of relieve, right? It's still for them they had to be there, and there's other kids, and there's this whole situation. So then they come home, it's like, maybe understanding it for what it is. It's not that they want to be like, screw you, Mom, I'm taking off my backpack. It's just that they just want to relieve. They feel comfortable at home, and it's in a way, it's like them just trying to shed that off, and they want to play. And that's a good thing because they feel comfortable where they're at. So you just have to kind of be like, okay, you can play. How you doing? Rub the back. Here's the
Yeah.
backpack, and that's where we put the backpack at. How was your day? Did that person bother you again? And yeah, it bothered me. Oh man, that's how kids are. They can don't and okay, and then the backpack's
Yeah, and I mean, I remember having my son when he was in kindergarten. He was getting in trouble every day, and I got I either talked to the teacher, had a note like what's going on, and I found out like he was messing around with a couple of these kids that he was friends with, and he's getting in trouble in his little kindergarten class. So I talked to him at home, and it's like, so what's going on? And he's like, well, I'm trying to listen, basically. I mean, this was kindergarten age, and he goes, but what was the kid's name? I can't remember the kid's name right now, but he's like, so-and-so is always bugging me. And I'm like, well, show me what he's doing. And so I'm like, I'll be you and you be your friend.
Okay.
And so I'm like sitting there, like listening to the teacher, and he comes over and he kind of pushes me a little. And I go, oh, okay. So I get it. So then I'm like, let's switch roles. You be you. I'm going to be your friend. And so he's sitting there listening, and I kind of did this little push, and he starts giggling. He just like, cut it out. And I'm like, okay, I get this, Michael. So when you're giggling and saying to your friend, cut it out, he's hearing play with me because you look like you totally want to play right now. So you have to get a little more assertive with this. And so when he starts bugging you like that, I want you to say no. And don't do that. And so we practice doing that. We switched the little role plays. And so, I kind of helped him like get more firm with his friend. And I think those are the ways that we can be helpful to them instead of, again, just they need the specifics and we need to understand their world. And the only way I could understand what was going on with him was to play it like that, to have this little game and like have him show me like what's going on so that I could get some insight into how I could be helpful to him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I mean, even adults, right? That's the same thing that we do in adulthood. We don't listen. We don't like empathically try and figure out what is that person really saying right now? What are the gestures and the mimics that are happening? Instead of just focusing on what you want to say, about what you want to get done in your agenda in this meeting, it's like, well, what's everyone else like? It seems like it would be less productive, but somehow it seems, but it's weird. Like if you really do it, there's an effectivity that comes into play that's just super. It's exponential somehow. It's because everyone's like all of a sudden they're on the same wavelength and everyone starts to groove, and it's the same thing with the kids. It's like if you can just kind of just take that extra breath, but you have to be in a good place. And if you got external stresses and you've got all these things in life that just life does just hit you sometimes. And it doesn't matter how good everything's set up. Life can throw, I mean, obviously this last year, I don't have to say it, everyone's been hit with a huge curveball, and these external stress factors are there. And if you're not able to buffer that to a certain point, like you just don't have the capacity sometimes to be like, okay, let's talk about your day at the Keter. You're like, I just did 25 meetings with, or like my wife's pharmacist. So she'll have like 40 different patients that come in, and they do that to her all day. Right. So she comes home at the end of the day, like, yeah, the last thing I want to do is ask this 3-year-old, like, what are you internalizing right now from the kindergarten? Like just put your shit away and we can talk about it later, like, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that's key to our parenting is assessing and knowing what keeps our batteries filled or our batteries recharged, and what depletes us, and how can and it was just what we opened this whole thing with that this is our most important job now, and it's a job that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so we want to put as much effort and activity toward it, to me, that epoch of my life, raising my kids, was the most important time of their lives when I was raising them. And it was probably my magnum opus, like where I did everything that I could to do that as well as I could during that time, because it wasn't my entire life. Like now I'm often doing other things. And so to really know, like, I did the best I could. That was a huge motivating factor for me while raising my kids, knowing that like, this is super important. Raising these humans is super important for me, for them, for this planet. I mean, how we get these people raised is really, really important. And we just have one shot at it. And it's it's just a really important job. Like, and I think when we slow down enough to realize that, that's one thing, in that taking in that breath when the kids again need something, and being able to just draw that patience forward when we need it is important. And if you're overstressed and overtired, what happens? Like, you can't do it. So you have to know how to take care of yourself. I know when I was raising my kids, I would get a massage every other week. And bubble baths were a big thing for me too, that really helped me get my energy back, like candles, incense, the whole thing.
Yeah, just chilling out.
Yeah, I mean, just like whatever, going for a walk, getting time with your wife. Like, what do you need to do to keep your batteries recharged so that this incessant, mom, dad thing doesn't trigger you is key. And when it triggers you, I mean, it's okay. Like, we all make mistakes. It's okay to be short. It's okay to have a quick temper. And when it's done and you realize, and yelling at the kid or blah, 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 that you go in and say, I apologized for yelling at you. I was stressed, and I just, like, making an apology for making a mistake of something that you don't really wish you had done.
Yeah.
It is such an amazing role modeling. Like, you want to raise kids that are compassionate and and a lot of other really cool qualities. Apologize to them when you've overstepped your image of yourself as a parent and done something like that, because that's going to have way more impact on them. Parents think that it's somehow diminishing our authority when we apologize for something, but it actually increases it exponentially. And teachers as well, when teachers do this. I remember Michelle came home one time and she's like, Mrs. Whatever yelled at us today, and then she apologized. And she was just blown away that the teacher apologized. It just gave her so much respect. That turned out to be like her favorite teacher, because that humanity that we give our children it just is so much. It affects them so greatly. So,
yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. I do that too sometimes. Like, I think my little girl fell on her bike, right? Because she's just practicing, and of course she's just gonna fall. And she's like, so and I'm like, I fall all the time, And she's like, looked at me like, that's impossible, that first look that you get, and you just kind of, I could kind of say that I'm superhero and I never fall, but it's way more gifting to her in that moment to be like, I pee my pants too, it happens to the best of us. And she'll be like kind of, they think it's like I peed like my pants like last week,
Right.
But it that humanity is teaching them that we are just humans. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and they pick up on it too. I was walking one time and I stubbed my toe on the sidewalk, like it was messed up, and it like was bloody, like immediately. And I was like, screaming, and my son, he was only like 4 years old, he's walking beside me, and he walks up to me and he's like, I hate when that happens.
It happens to them like all the time too.
And I felt so consoled. I know, it was my words like that came back to me that that I had always said to him.
I love kids for that.
And it was just, it felt so good, and I just love it. And I love that he had learned that. And so it's like what we say to our kids over and over becomes their internal and external voice. So what do you want your kids to hear? Like we all have a parent who sits on our shoulder and yaks in our ear. And what do you want the parent sitting on your child's shoulder to be saying to them? And that's the kind of things that you want to say to your kids repeatedly. Don't give up, go for it. Stay with the job until it's done. Like, what are the little mantras and what are the little things that you say repeatedly to your kids? That's going to be what sits on their shoulder and whispers in their ear.
Yeah, it's amazing. They're just little recording machines. They want to make you happy, and it's so humbling to realize that, God, how high they hold you too. It's like such a responsibility. They hold you above everything. It's crazy. Like, my 9-year-old is just like, everything I do, he's watching. Like, he's watching me. Whether I realize it or not, and he sees me when I flip out and do these things, and hopefully I feel like that's also a Covey thing. It's so much. I've listened to so much of it that it's just like, and like you always talked about this emotional bank account,
Yes, that's part of it. Yes, absolutely. The emotional bank account and keeping that thing full, so important.
Every
so
now and then a little
be,
withdrawal. Yeah. I mean, it happens. Yeah.
For sure. But as long as you're doing those, and there's an idea in my class that I teach called a genuine encounter moment. And it's a focused, direct attention that you place on your child that's not distracted or busy. It's kind of like what we were talking about. So, at least one time a day where your child comes up and says, Dad, 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 Mom, 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 that you stop what you're doing and you see the world through their eyes. That's putting money in that emotional bank account so that you can have moments where you don't like you're staying on the call or you're doing something else or whatever. So you've got to keep their little emotional bank accounts full, and just paying 100% attention to them and being in their world does that enormously. And again, we have to do that for ourselves and for our relationship as well, to keep that charged and keep that up, because you can't give up from a place of lack. And so to be able to give to our children, what do you need to do to take care of yourself? How can you support your spouse? Like each of you having a talk with each other, and that you're making sure each other are getting, that you're helping and assisting and giving each other breaks when you need it, or even when you don't need it. I think that's what recharges the batteries more, is taking time when you don't need it so much. True.
Yeah. This is like, I think I have to kind of, I could probably go for another 3 hours on this stuff. But we've been going for about an hour and 20 minutes, so I feel like this is a good place to stop. I think I know I want to come back to you on this, because there's so many topics, and what I will do for sure is obviously share all of your work and your websites and everything in the show notes, and I'll do a little intro afterward. Like I like to do it after we have a conversation, because I have a better feel for you. But just on that level, I want to say thank you very much for sharing. Franzi, if you're at home and you're watching this, I hope you're taking notes. I knew it was going to be like that. I was like so excited to have you on, because I kind of, when you first got in contact, I was like, I looked at your website. I'm like, oh yeah, parenting. It's a science project. It feels like sometimes, raising little humans and these humans that are so dependent on you. And it's I don't know.
Well, it's big. And I don't think enough of us get that hit early enough, that how important it is. I've had parents who took my classes that, quit jobs. I had parents who adjusted their schedules so they each worked a split shift so that their kids always had one or the other of them there. Like I've had parents move. It's like realizing how important this is. Some people need to shake up their lives a little bit and accommodate for it, so that they're really doing it, because it's a disservice to ourselves and especially to our children not to. I just, we need to do the best that we can with this job that we're given. And I feel like being a good steward of my kids is the most important thing that I can do and be when I'm raising them.
Yeah, I agree with you on that completely. It's one of those things that it's just, you have to grow too as a person, and it's just be willing to just be human, and I love this idea of just looking them in the eyes, and it's once you get that, it's almost like that's where you always want to be. You feel it. It's so giving in its own way, having that authentic relationship with your clone, basically.
Right. And to put aside all of my woulda, shouldas, you should, this should, that should, and just listen. Even this morning I was walking one of my grandkids to school, and I noticed myself wanting to go to that place of, blah, 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 telling him something. I'm like, well, what did you think about whatever it was? And I get this whole conversation about his process and his thinking. And it was like, wow, like if I would have led the conversation the way my brain was telling me to lead it, I wouldn't have learned all of this. Like, this is super, super cool. And it's just such a better way to go about it.
Yeah. It's just so much, it is. That's just, it's really good advice. Yeah. Yeah. So
okay.
on that level, I'll say goodbye to you. Otherwise I'll just keep on talking.
Yeah. Right. And, Podmatch is new for me. That's how I was just like, haven't done it before. So if we'll go rate each other in there or something, I think that helps me like move up in the little podcast world and, Podmatch world. Cause I don't know why I've been doing this lately. Cause I get a lot of interviews, but I think I got in there and it was competitive.
Maybe. Yeah. There's a ranking thing happening there and stuff. But it takes me about a week or so to go back, but I